their personal interests, which is very important to select topics, materials, as Rubinho was saying. Sometimes we don't have much choice. We must use a course book. But it helps us to select, adapt, supplement. Along with personal interests, prefer topics to discuss in class. Preferred kinds of materials. Some groups prefer... Now I've got two very different groups. One of the groups, they like reading articles. And if I tell them, okay, today we have a video, they go like, ugh. On the other hand, I have the totally opposite group. They like videos, and if I tell, okay, let's read, oh. So it's important for us to know what kind of thing they prefer. It's important to do everything, but knowing what they prefer helps us organize everything. It's interesting for us to gather their perceived strengths and perceived weaknesses. Maybe you've had this kind of comment. Students who say, grammar is so difficult for me, but their grammar is actually okay. Their problem is actually vocabulary, pronunciation, or fluency. But it's important for us to be able to align things and what their priorities are. And it goes to current use or expected use of English. Because they want to be fluent, but what do we tackle first? So think of some priorities. In terms of learning preferences and study habits, we can do it in the needs analysis, but to be very honest, the best way to do it is observing when they are interacting, when they're doing an exercise. To complement the needs analysis, it's interesting to do a diagnostic task. For us to be able to compare what they think they need with what we perceive as their needs. And, well, basically identifying main priorities, and then we can confirm or refute what they believe. And it's very interesting for us, if we do a diagnostic task, to tell them what the results were and compare it with the needs analysis. I'll tell you my experience. With one of my groups this year, we did the needs analysis, and they thought that their main needs were listening and speaking. And then suddenly, by doing diagnostic tasks, we found out that listening was actually okay. They wanted to be much beyond their level. But according to what was expected for them, their pre-intermediate, they were listening quite well. So it was important for me to tell them, look, this was the task, this is your result, so don't panic here, let's focus on that. And so that they can start to see things more clearly. Underhill, in his Testing Spoken Language book, recommends a discussion task, which is nothing more than proposing a speaking task and assessing with criteria in mind. The discussion task doesn't necessarily need a time limit, for example. It can be something very free. Do it as much as, let it go for as long as they feel comfortable. And it's important for you to see how long they can go, how much they can speak. The important thing here is how to analyze their production in the discussion task. Because analyzing grammar is nice and easy. Exercise, correct, incorrect, correct, incorrect. Assessing speaking is not like that. So I have some questions for you. When you are assessing your learners' speaking, what criteria do you use? What do you think about? And what do you tend to consider the most important or the most relevant aspects of learners speaking? Considering everything that speaking involves, what in your opinion is important and should be assessed? 1 minute? Well, do you have some suggestions of criteria?
If they're speaking Portuguese when they speak, because when a student is speaking in English, he makes a pause and thinks in Portuguese to speak in English. That's how you are assessing if he's fluent or not.
So you get the consequence, which is fluency or speed. If they're translating, it's kind of slower.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yes, sometimes they are not fluent, not even in Portuguese. They don't know how to say, they don't know how to discuss, they don't have any opinion. Depends on the topic. They have legal, é isso aí, falou. Tá bom, você viu. É isso aí, mano. So, how can they put it in English?
And this is a very important issue for the diagnostic task. It is important for you to consider your group profile and think of a task which will hopefully get them to talk. Because depending on the task you select, you're going to get simple answers and you're not going to be able to assess.
That's why it is important for us as teachers to provide them with information, but because sometimes they don't talk simply because they don't know what to say about it, even in Portuguese. So it's our task to provide them with information, with videos, with a text, with a pre-activity, okay? Because sometimes they don't have content to talk about.
And then it's not only us as English teachers, but us as educators. More criteria?
We can see this one for the vestibular. They have to write a composition for us. You know what happens?
I think it's important to know if they can transmit the idea. It doesn't have to be perfect. They don't have to be fluent, but if they can transmit the idea right, if I can understand what they mean to say, it's something.
To make themselves understood, I think that's important. Communication as flow.
I think this is the idea that I heard the most from your discussions. You should be able to communicate. That's it. Well, I got here some criteria which Cambridge recommends and uses to assess speaking in exams. Have you ever done a Cambridge certificate?
Yes.
Lots of yeses. Well, you get grammar within speaking. And it's important for us, it's part of the being fluent and not translating everything, using accurate grammar and how much they can use. Same thing for vocabulary. How much vocabulary they have, what's their range, and how correct or how precise they're able to be. Now, much of what you are telling me is the discourse management. So organizing your ideas, being coherent, keeping cohesion going, coherence and cohesion there. Basically organizing your ideas in a way that makes sense, which will sometimes be hard for me to do today, but please forgive me. Sometimes, I know some of you have already been in this position. Sometimes we're thinking so many things and well, pronunciation is another aspect that I heard many of you mentioning. And interactive communication, how much they can interact, respond, develop the interaction is something very important. So how much can they go into the topic, justify ideas, and so on. Sometimes we tend to privilege one thing or another. Some people tend to privilege organization of ideas. Some people tend to privilege pronunciation. Some people tend to privilege how much they develop interaction. But actually, all of them have equal weight, and they form the speaking skill. Well, considering, after doing all of this, the diagnostic task, the needs analysis, it's very important, before I go here, to set some priorities. Not to forget everything that you did in the beginning and just teach the course book. And forget all these beautiful analysis that we have done. How do we set some priorities? Basically by matching their needs with what you perceive as their needs in the diagnostic task. Think, what do they need most? Consider both of these. And I'll give you an example. This is what I did with my students. Let me tell you about them. It's a pre-intermediate group, so they're able to communicate in fairly basic situations. They can talk about family, simple things about their job, a little bit about traveling, you know, the common topics. And they came to me one day, not in the needs analysis, afterwards, and they told me, we want to talk about Brazilian politics, which is something that is not in the book sometimes because it can offend people. And then I was talking to them and doing an interview for needs analysis to understand. And they wanted to be able to discuss economic situation in Brazil. They wanted to talk about what's going on with presidency and blah, blah, blah. But they are pre-intermediate. Well, I needed to know how much they could already do. So my diagnostic task was, let's talk about politics. Easy as that. Realistic. Pretend you're in a bar drinking some beer. Talk about politics. What do you think? What's going on? And I identified some needs. But they were working in groups, so the atmosphere was actually kind of light. But I was monitoring attentively. What I identified was the following. In terms of lexis, they obviously needed more vocabulary to talk about Brazilian politics. It's tough. Sometimes we don't have that vocabulary. It's so specific. But they also needed some strategies to be able to avoid the vocabulary. Because you all know what they do when they don't know a word. You know. They either say it in Portuguese, "Ô, teacher, como é que fala?" You know. They needed, for them to be more fluent, to be able to expand the topic, to stop translating everything, they needed these strategies. Circumlocution, to be able to go around the words and kind of explain the concept. Or paraphrasing, explaining what they want in different ways. So either going around it or explaining. And they lacked these strategies. It was a very serious problem. Sometimes, some of them, they were even more autonomous and were trying to find stuff in the dictionary, but this disturbs fluency. So they needed some strategies for vocabulary. For pronunciation, I got a minor thing. They had this problem with short and long vowels. But actually, it didn't disturb the communication much. They were making themselves understood. They were able to communicate. So this was my secondary objective. In terms of grammar, I was actually surprised. You see, the thing with the diagnostic task is you can be surprised. I was surprised with how well they could state facts about what the situation is. what was lacking was vocabulary, but they were able to use proper grammar to talk about basically the present. This is happening, or in the past, this happened, present, past. It was pretty good. What they lacked and they wanted was speculation. They wanted to think about the future and what was going on and what they could do. And this is something else that was disturbing their fluency. They didn't get the message across because of this lack. In terms of interaction, discourse organization, we had this serious problem. And actually this circumlocution and interaction were my main objectives. They were interrupting people in such a rude manner, but they didn't realize. They were saying like simple things like, I think Dilma, no, Temer, like this. They had no idea that they were being so rude and how rude it sounds in English.
It's a cultural thing.
It is a cultural thing. Yes. Brazilian people, they have this tendency to interrupt. I guess it's a good and a bad thing because Brazilian people in general, we're very good conversationalists. We are able to interweave the contributions and say our opinion, and then the other person says theirs, and the conversation goes. But in English, sometimes we need to stop, listen, disagree in a polite manner, and then go on. They are much less receptive. If they're talking to a British person and they say, no, it's like that, you know what's going to happen.